Hello, Shoyan here. I'm continuing to work on the renovation site, turning a Japanese-style room into a modern-style one. The owner's young grandchild will be using this room, and they are not a fan of Japanese style, so I'm making it over into a clean, modern room. Last time, I showed the dismantling and floor installation. No matter how carefully you lay the floor, if you don't protect it properly, it's easy to scratch it up later. So I start by covering everything, then move on to the ceiling. During the dismantling, I left the original crown molding in place. I only do this for renovations. We couldn't change the AC location. The outside is already finished and there's a hole in the wall. We're planning to put the same unit back in that spot. If we were raising the ceiling, it'd be fine, but we can't go any lower. So to make space just for the AC while framing the ceiling, I had to let the frame overlap slightly onto the molding, as you can see here. This was the only height that worked, and that's why I kept the molding. I framed the ceiling here. Since this used to be a Japanese-style room, there were no columns spaced at 45 centimeters. But I can tie the old molding and the new furring strips together into one solid frame. That makes for a pretty sturdy ceiling edge. I'm doing the ceiling framing as usual with 4 cm by 4 cm lumber, which we call nobuchi. Using only nobuchi might look a bit rough, but I keep them at 300 mm spacing across the whole ceiling. The screws bite into nobuchi really well, much better than thin furring strips. Also, everything lines up nice and straight. It becomes a strong, solid ceiling frame too. Personally, I always like building ceilings with only nobuchi, but every carpenter has their own way of doing the framing. For the slight upward curve of the ceiling, I give it about a 4 to 6 mm rise in the center. If you make it completely flat, it ends up looking like it's sagging a bit. I use screws to secure the ceiling frame. For the ceiling hangers only, it's standard practice to use steel nails with a nail gun. If one of the screws gets cut, the ceiling can sag at that spot. For the insulation above the frame, I was able to reuse the existing material. I just lay it back neatly, the area stays the same. This insulation is about 22 or 23 years old. It couldn't be reused if it were 10 years older, because the bags that wrap the insulation used to be different. But insulation from this era has bags similar to today's products, so it can be reused. There's no damage to the insulation at all. Next, I start hanging the ceiling boards. I'm using 9 mm drywall. I don't use a power board cutter here. I just cut everything with a utility knife. You won't see the edges tucked up behind the walls anyway, so even if the cut's a little uneven, it's fine. It's much faster to use a utility knife than to set up a power board cutter and a dust collector. I always use my trusty old assistant to hold the board from below while installing the ceiling board. Ceilings are probably the easiest place to hang drywall, since there aren't any obstacles in the way. Now the ceiling is done. Next, I installed the closet where the oshiire used to be. The first step is building the outer wooden frame. This isn't a prefab closet. I build the frame with wood and the door will be custom made by the door maker. So it's a built-in closet with a made-to-fit door. I add a jamb to the existing column, but the column is tilting a bit. So I adjust the thickness at the top and bottom of the jamb to match. This is especially important for top-hung sliding doors, as they only move horizontally. If the jamb isn't plumb, it causes problems. Since the existing column is nicely polished with wax, glue won't stick to that surface. So I first sand off the leftover wax, wipe it clean with a damp rag to remove the dust, and use wood glue to attach the jamb to the existing column. The wood glue sticks just fine even if the surface is a little damp after wiping off the dust. Actually, that slight dampness helps the glue grab better. I could have used glue alone for the new jamb, but this is a closet entrance and there will be doors. Since it'll all be hidden when closed, I also use screws to secure the jamb. I hide the screw heads with wooden plugs. But honestly, closet doors are usually outward folding types. So once the doors are in place, everything gets hidden. Screwing and plugging with wooden plugs is more than enough. I've attached the jamb to the exposed original column, so I needed to adjust the thickness to make it fit. On the other side, the jamb just needs to be plumb, so I use shims to fill the gaps caused by the tilt. Once the vertical jambs are in, I measure the length of the kamoi and mark it to fit the opening. Since the kamoi for the old oshiire is still there, I attach this new one below it and fasten it upward through the groove. So I only measure the length and set it in place.
There.
Where the jamb meets the drywall, I finish it with casing. This is because the head jamb for the original doorway and the new frame here are both 12 centimeters thick, so I need to add casing here. It wouldn't look right if only the closet protruded, so to keep the whole room consistent, I finish all the openings with wooden casing.
けとくと。
I don't miter the corners on that casing at 45 degrees. Instead, I use a butt joint. This leaves the vertical member sitting slightly proud and makes it a lot easier to work with. That's because in Japanese-style rooms, the finished vertical pieces are usually set slightly proud compared with the horizontal ones. The horizontal members are slightly smaller than the columns, so they don't stick out past the vertical ones, hiding the cut ends and fitting neatly. If you tried to make the casing perfectly flush, you'd have to adjust the size of every piece to make it line up. But with butt joints and reveals, it's easy to keep everything looking clean and intentional. It makes the job go much smoother. With the frame and casing done, I can finally start on the wall framing.
まあちょっとやね。
I can't do all the walls at once, so I go one face at a time using a laser to check and adjust for plumb.
これを。ねえ。Listen up.
This used to be a Japanese-style room, so the columns are spaced about 90 centimeters apart. There's a gap between the wall and the column, so I set furring strips vertically there as studs first. Then I install horizontal furring strips over them. The vertical pieces have to go in first since they wouldn't fit afterward. I check the alignment from the side and with a straight edge, making sure everything is plumb and level. It sounds simple, but this is where wall renovation gets tricky. Those vertical furring strips I added as substitute studs. If I don't secure them in the middle, the whole thing flexes. So I find the horizontal frame behind the old wall board and screw the studs there. The wall frame is spaced evenly. Now that all the wall framing is done, I put up the closet shelf before hanging the drywall.
.600でカットすれば。
I install the shelf before the drywall, so the ends are embedded into the wall. That way, it's stronger and looks cleaner because you won't see the supports. With a 30mm laminated board, the shelf is strong enough even over a 1.8 meter span. Now I start hanging the drywall. Unlike the ceiling, I use a power board cutter and a circular saw here. It's just quicker and cleaner. In renovations, receptacles inside the outlet box are left in the wall. I leave this one on purpose so that they can still use the power and the switch. In new builds, if the carpenter marks the wall, the electrician usually cuts the hole for these. But in a renovation, carpenters have to cut the hole and pull the receptacle out. That's one of the little extras that makes installing drywall trickier.
1187でよっ
In this case, the casing will be embedded in the wall. I can notch the board and fit it around it, but instead, I notch the casing to match the board's thickness. Since this also affects how the wallpaper finish looks, it's better if everything is attached as neatly as possible for tricky spots. If I notch the casing straight, the board just slots in and the finish comes out nice and smooth. Now, for the last step, I install the baseboard. Only for the baseboard do I miter the corners. The corners are rounded, so it won't fit cleanly with a butt joint. So I use miter joints only for the baseboard. To fasten the baseboard, I use glue and a pin nailer. The nail heads don't show. The baseboard has a groove for the pin nails, so if I shoot into that, you can't even tell. And this time, I'm finishing the room without any crown molding.
こっちとこっちに
Now that the doors are installed, the tatami room has become a modern style space. I kind of miss the tatami, but now it's a room that suits a younger person. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.